Let's talk about something interesting. Underneath the dry savannah woodland of far north Queensland, hidden beneath grevillea and eucalyptus that look identical to 1,000 other stretches of outback, there is a network of tunnels large enough to drive 2 double-decker buses through side by side. It has been there for almost 200,000 years, and parts of it have still never been fully mapped. This is Andara, home to the longest lava tube system on Earth. And if this is your first time on Lost Australia, welcome. Make sure you are subscribed, because we cover places exactly like this every single week. Sites that sit quietly beneath the surface of this country, while almost nobody realises what is actually down there. Around 190,000 years ago, in what geologists classify as the Cainozoic era, the Andara volcano erupted in an event so violent it remains one of the largest single volcanic flows ever recorded on the planet. Molten rock, reaching temperatures of around 1,200 degrees Celsius, poured out of the volcano at a rate of roughly 1,000 cubic metres every single second. Over the course of the eruption, an estimated 23.3 cubic kilometres of lava flowed outward, enough, according to Queensland's own park authorities, to fill Sydney Harbour completely in just 6 days. The lava travelled more than 90 kilometres to the north and over 160 kilometres to the northwest, making it one of the longest lava flows ever produced by a single volcano anywhere in the world. What makes Andara different from a typical volcanic eruption is not just its scale, but the specific way it left the landscape behind. As the lava surged along old, pre-existing watercourses, the outer surface, exposed to the air, cooled and hardened relatively quickly, forming a solid crust. Underneath that crust, insulated from the cooling air above, the molten lava kept flowing for tens of kilometres more, carving its own path through the hardened shell that had formed around it. When the eruption eventually stopped, and the remaining lava drained away, it left behind exactly what that process implies. Long, hollow, cave-like tunnels running for enormous distances beneath the surface, some of them wide and tall enough to feel less like a cave and more like an underground cathedral. The Awamian people, the traditional custodians of this stretch of savannah country, knew portions of the lava tube network long before any European set foot in the region, though according to the accounts passed down through early contact with settlers. They kept a deliberate distance from them rather than making regular use of the tubes themselves. It would take European cattlemen, arriving decades later, to bring the tunnels into wider written record. In 1862, brothers from the Collins family settled the surrounding land, establishing what would become a large pastoral run across the area now occupied by the national park. The lava tubes themselves were well recognised locally by 1891, appearing in written accounts as a curious geological feature on the property, though for close to a century afterward, they received only occasional, unmanaged visits from anyone curious enough to climb down and take a look. It was not until 1989 that formal guided tours began, and the land was eventually declared Andara Volcanic National Park, with the Collins family granted a special lease to continue operating tourism on the site they had lived alongside for generations. Even with tourism established, the full extent of the tube system has never been completely mapped. During a major expedition in the late 1980s, known as Operation Raleigh, researchers identified 68 separate caves within the wider system. Bram Collins, a descendant of the original settling family and long-time operator of the tourism experience at Andara, personally discovered an entirely new cave as recently as 1992, a full century after the tubes were first written into the historical record. To this day, the true total extent of the network beneath the park remains unknown, with researchers regularly acknowledging that portions of the system have likely never been entered by anyone at all. If you are finding this as strange as I do, make sure you are subscribed, because what lives inside these tunnels is arguably even more remarkable than the tunnels themselves. Before we get into that, I want to mention something that ties directly into stories like this one. I put together an ebook called The Timeline Lie, covering 15 documented sites across every Australian state where peer-reviewed research has quietly rewritten the history most of us were taught in school, evidence that is decades old, fully verified, and still barely known outside academic circles. If a place like Andara genuinely surprises you, that book goes even deeper into the parts of this country most people were never given the full picture on. The link is below this video if you would like to take a look. The single strangest cave within the entire Andara system is Bayliss Cave, and its significance has nothing to do with size and everything to do with what scientists found living inside it. When researchers first properly surveyed the cave's internal atmosphere in the 1980s, they discovered something that should not, by ordinary logic, be able to sustain life at all. Deep inside Bayliss Cave, beyond a low, narrow section known to researchers as the Duck Under, carbon dioxide levels climb to around 6% of the total atmosphere, roughly 200 times higher than the concentration found in ordinary outside air. As carbon dioxide increases, oxygen correspondingly drops, and humidity inside the deeper sections regularly reaches full saturation, with water actively condensing on the cave walls. By any conventional expectation, an environment like that should be close to sterile, hostile to almost everything except the most basic microbial life. Instead, Bayliss Cave turned out to be one of the most biologically rich cave systems ever documented anywhere in the world. Researchers have recorded dozens of species of cave-adapted invertebrates living permanently within its depths, animals scientifically classified as troglobionts, meaning they are so specifically adapted to life underground that they cannot survive anywhere else. Among them are two separate species of blind cockroach, an eyeless cave cricket found nowhere else on Earth, several species of blind, cave-adapted spiders, and an entire genus of weevil, formerly named Andara, after the site itself, so distinct from every other known weevil lineage in Australia that researchers studying it could not confidently place it within any existing group. When the site was first properly documented in the late 1980s, it was recognised as one of the 20 richest known cave invertebrate communities in the entire world. And ongoing research since then has continued adding to that species list. A comprehensive survey published in 2021 recorded a minimum of 78 distinct arthropod species across the wider Andara cave network, a significant number of which remain formally undescribed by science to this day, existing in the scientific record only as specimens waiting for someone to properly classify them. What makes this ecosystem particularly strange is the question of what is actually powering it. In an ordinary cave ecosystem, energy typically enters from outside, carried in by bats, water, or organic debris washed in from the surface. Researchers studying the elevated carbon dioxide levels deep inside Bayliss Cave have pointed to several possible biogenic sources, including the respiration of tree roots that penetrate down through cracks in the rock, the cave's substantial bat population, and the invertebrate community itself. But the exact balance of what sustains such an unusually dense, isolated food web this far from the surface has never been fully resolved. The bats themselves add another layer to the story. Baker's Cave, part of the wider network, serves as a major maternity roost for several species of insectivorous microbat, with populations estimated at times to include as many as 80,000 individual bats during the breeding season, one of the largest such colonies anywhere in North Queensland. Where there are that many bats roosting in a confined space, predators inevitably follow. Brown tree snakes have been documented moving through the tubes in numbers, drawn by the sheer density of prey overhead, turning sections of the cave into an active, self-contained predator and prey system playing out entirely in the dark, far from any daylight. Above ground, the tubes have left their mark on the landscape in a different, more subtle way. Running for roughly 40 kilometres across the park is a raised snake-like feature known locally as the wall, standing between 5 and 20 metres high and roughly 200 metres wide, believed by researchers to sit directly above one of the buried lava tube conduits that once carried molten rock along a former stream course. It is one of the more visible surface clues to the scale of what runs beneath the ground. A long, low ridge tracing the exact path where a river of lava once flowed, insulated inside its own hardened shell, for a length most visitors driving past would never think twice about. There is one more geological detail that sets Andara apart from almost every other lava tube system studied anywhere in the world. Most lava tubes form on top of older volcanic rock, layer built upon layer over successive eruptions. Andara's tubes instead developed directly on top of a granitic basement, an unusual foundation for a lava flow of this scale, making the system not just the longest of its kind, but structurally distinct in a way researchers still reference when comparing it to other lava tube networks internationally. Combined with its length, its age, and the sheer volume of lava involved in its formation, Andara is frequently described by geologists as one of the most significant volcanic landforms anywhere on the continent, sitting almost entirely unnoticed beneath ordinary-looking savannah country that gives away nothing of what lies beneath it. What Andara ultimately represents is not one single unsolved mystery in the way some of the sites we cover on this channel are, but a landscape where the unresolved details keep accumulating the deeper anyone looks. A tube system so extensive that new caves are still being found more than a century after the first one was documented. An underground chamber with an atmosphere that should be nearly lifeless, instead supporting one of the richest cave ecosystems ever recorded, sustained by an energy source scientists still cannot fully account for. And an entire genus of insect found nowhere else on the planet, quietly living out its existence in total darkness, in a tunnel carved by lava that stopped moving before modern humans had even reached this part of the world. Somewhere beneath that ordinary looking stretch of Queensland savannah, the tunnels are still there, largely unmapped, still hiding new caves, and still supporting a community of life that has evolved entirely in the dark, waiting for the next person willing to climb down and take a proper look.